Ladies and gentlemen, look who is now making his way to the world-famous octagon, flanked by UFC CEO Dana White, 45, soon to be 47, President-elect Donald Trump.
I wish the people at home could hear the sound in this room.
It's so loud in here.
It is so loud. It's always loud when he comes here, but now that he's won, now that he's the president again, oh my God.
So Donald Trump making his way to watch the UFC, which he absolutely loves, and doing so with some sort of victory lap after regaining the presidency earlier this month in emphatic fashion with an election blowout of the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris. Congratulations, sir.
I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it really looks like ancient Rome here. This is sort of the conquering Republican Caesar who's going into the Coliseum, and everyone's cheering, and he's got his political gladiators with him. That appearance isn't just about him enjoying the applause. He's sending a message to the Senate.
For sure.
Like, not only are you entertained, but these are my people, and are you willing to fight? Because here's who I have.
First, they likened him to George Washington. Now, even CNN is calling Trump a conquering Caesar. What's going on here? Well, we're going to find out precisely why these comments are actually even more accurate than you could ever have imagined. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, and we're going to see precisely why so many are comparing Trump to some of the greatest figures in history, but even more importantly, what it all actually reveals about you. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in.
I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it really looks like ancient Rome here. This is sort of the conquering Republican Caesar who's going into the Coliseum, and everyone's cheering, and he's got his political gladiators with him. That appearance isn't just about him enjoying the applause. He's sending a message to the Senate.
For sure.
Like, not only are you entertained, but these are my people, and are you willing to fight? Because here's who I have.
It really was an entrance like no other. A packed Madison Square Garden where just weeks before Trump held a massive rally in the lead up to his landslide win, celebrated Trump's triumphant return akin to what CNN called a conquering Republican Caesar returning to the Coliseum with his political gladiators. And then, to the astonishment of the entire arena and everyone watching worldwide, UFC champion Jon Jones handed his championship belt to President Trump as a gesture of heartfelt admiration. It was an absolutely incredible moment of patriotism and respect, and it crowned what was an event without parallel in American history. So what on earth is going on here? What's really happening in all of this? Well, you'll notice that comparing Trump to Caesar is actually just par for the course in his accolades. After all, just last week at the America First celebration at Mar-a-Lago, the great Sylvester Stallone introduced President Trump with this.
We are in the presence of a really mythical character. I love mythology. And this individual does not exist on this planet. Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I'm in awe. And I'll just say this, and I mean it. When George Washington defended his country, he had no idea that he was going to change the world. Because without him, you can imagine what the world would look like. Guess what? We got the second George Washington. Congratulations!
And of course, comparisons to greatness hardly stop there. I don't know how many of you saw the gigantic 5-story high float of President Trump as a god emperor that rolled through the streets of a parade in Italy a few years back. It was part of the annual Via Reggio Carnival parade in Tuscany, which has quite the history. They've been doing it every year now since 1873. And according to the website of the parade, Trump is depicted like this in recognition that he was, at that time, without a doubt, the dominant male par excellence on the world stage. And again, this is just par for the course for Trump. He's constantly depicted in all kinds of heroic and epic ways as an emperor, as a king, and to bring it all full circle as Rocky himself, as the champion of the world. And there's a very fascinating reason for this, and Sylvester Stallone alluded to it. One of the best books on Trump out there, well, besides mine, of course, but one of the best books I've read on President Trump of late is the book Esoteric Trumpism by Konstantin von Hofmeister. It's an excellent analysis of Trump as a very real mythic figure. And what Hofmeister does here is he draws from the civilizational theory of the scholar Oswald Spengler, who observed that populations who are concerned over history, over their declining civilizations, populations witnessing their social order suffering from severe stagnation and political paralysis, almost always end up putting their hopes on what Spengler called a Caesar figure. So this is the mythic prototype of who can actually rescue the nation. A Caesar figure is a person who rises up and publicly fights for and defends the civilization and society from the forces who seek to destroy it. And this is exactly what we're seeing with Trump. The key here, as Hofmeister brilliantly argues, the key here is that because of where we are in our period as a nation, because of the peril and the very real woke Marxist-inflicted cultural decline that we've all been witnessing to our utter horror, Trump's mass appeal is not ideological. It's not political. It's not economic. It's not analytical in any of these senses. Trump's mass appeal is mythic. We are in the very real realm of myth right now when it comes to Trump, precisely because more Americans than ever fear the destruction of our society. And so we see Trump in very ancient and very mythic, heroic terms, like any other population facing the same threat as we are would. Now, some of you may be familiar with the heavy metal band Wasp. Some of my fellow metalheads from the 80s will certainly remember Wasp. I sound like I just came from one of their concerts screaming out there in the audience. Well, believe it or not, they're still going strong. And take a look at what their concerts look like today. They've gone full MAGA. Again, this isn't ideological. This isn't economic. This isn't intellectualist. The iconic imagery of Trump in a heavy metal concert like this is utterly mythic. That's what heavy metal draws from. It draws from the great, Tolkien-like myths of old to express timeless truths. And so this all begs the question, what is this heroic myth that Trump is embodying and that has awakened such mass adoration and support? Well, that is exactly what we're going to find out, and it's more profound than you ever imagined. Again, when I reflect on this election, I'm reminded of why it's so essential to think critically about the issues of our times. With manipulative algorithms and biased media creating echo chambers, it can feel impossible to get a clear view of what's happening now. Luckily, there's a solution that empowers people to get the full picture and make up their own minds. Ground News is a website and app that compiles stories from over 50,000 outlets from around the world, lets you compare coverage across the political spectrum, and keeps you fully informed by showing you stories you might otherwise miss. See for yourself at ground.news/Steve. Take a look at this story on Ground News about Republicans winning back control of the Senate. Now, currently, over 400 sources are covering this story. Roughly 35% of the coverage is coming from the left and 30% from the right. Now, with Ground News, we can compare headlines ourselves to get a clear picture of how each side is presenting the issue. A left-leaning headline states, Republicans seize control of U.S. Senate for first time in 4 years, while a right-leaning headline reads, GOP takes back Senate majority in devastating blow to Dems. So the left-leaning headline uses seize control, suggesting an aggressive takeover, while the right-leaning headline frames the shift as a devastating blow to the Dems, emphasizing the impact to the Democrats. My favorite ground news feature is the blind spot feed. It shows stories that are heavily covered by one side but not the other, which helps me stay fully informed. With the recent election, I expect the differences in coverage are only going to increase in the coming months. If you want to stay informed on important issues and get a full view of the news landscape, check out ground.news/Steve. You can click the link in the description or scan the QR code for 50% off the unlimited access Vantage plan. This is the best deal of the year, gang. And if you're already a subscriber, you can gift Ground News for 50% off to family or friends. When you support Ground News, you're also supporting the work we do here at Turley Talks. Click on that link below right now. When all is said and done, the mythic appeal of Trump for our times involves his reawakening of the classical conception of manhood. Take a look at some of these headlines of late, like this one from the New York Times. With cabinet picks, Trump seeks to inject hypermasculinity into Washington. Or this from the City Journal, Trump's masculine appeal. Or again from the New York Times, Trump offered men something that Democrats never could. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the legacy media's pathetic attempts littered with woke-splaining. But what these articles did at least recognize is that Trump galvanized men like no one else. Eric Lendrum of American Greatness recently pointed out that Trump's complete dominance with men is the one consistent factor across all other demographic lines in the country from the last election. Trump won married men by 22 points. He won unmarried men by 2. White men by 23, white suburban men by 27, non-college white men by 40, college-educated white men by 3, and he won with men of every single age demographic. He even won the youngest of men. He won the oldest of men, even across racial lines. The overwhelming support for President Trump among men was staggering. He outright won Hispanic men by 12 points, and he won the highest number of black men, 21% of any Republican in half a century. What Trump and others like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan have done is they have provided an answer to the current crisis of masculinity in the midst of our woke-induced cultural rot. In a secularized world where patriarchy is routinely denounced as an oppressive evil, men, of course, have increasingly found themselves completely disenfranchised from the historic gender norms that govern society for centuries. And what Trump embodies more than anything else is precisely the triumphant return of those norms. And what are they? What does it mean to be a man in the classical sense of the term? The classical ancient conception of manhood understood the man as a microcosm of the cosmos, literally created in the image of the gods. Remember that in classical cosmography, the world is made up of 4 cosmic elements, right? Earth, air, fire, and water. That's why the number 4 is a cosmic number. And in the biblical account, the first man is named Adam. And it's not a coincidence that his name has 4 letters. It's not a coincidence that there are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, recalibrating the entire cosmos around Christ, who is the second Adam. And at the heart of this biblical account, Adam's manhood centers on exercising dominion throughout the whole of creation. This is what we might call Adam's Great Commission, to rule and reign as God would throughout the whole of creation. And the very first act that this dominion involved, besides naming the animals and receiving his bride who came from his side, was that he was supposed to slay the serpent. Adam's dominion fundamentally involved defending his bride from the serpent, and he failed. He failed to crush the head of the snake, which signifies Satan. That's why Christ, who is the second Adam, defends his bride, the church, which comes from his side of blood and water, the baptism and communion that flowed from his right side on the cross. He defends his bride by crushing the head of the serpent as he's crucified on Calvary. Calvary means the place of the skull, right? Christ's cross drove a stake into that skull and thereby crushed the head of the serpent. And so this is why manhood is so often associated with dragon killing in the form of St. George or in the Nordic myth of Beowulf. This is why England has their cross of St. George as their flag. It's a symbol, at least in part, of redeemed masculinity, that men are called to be dragon slayers, to protect their brides from the satanic serpents. And I would argue this is precisely the kind of masculinity that Trump embodies and has reawakened through our nation for such a time as this. Trump is not our hero merely because of what he has done for our nation, but because of what he has done for us, particularly for us men. He's restored to us the dignity of what it means to be a true man, and as such, to rescue our nation from the forces that would seek to destroy it together as one. That is what we saw this weekend, and that is what is about to change our nation and the world forever.
Together we can truly make America great again.